What if a mission designed to bring astronauts safely home suddenly spiraled into a situation far worse than anyone could imagine?
Astronauts from Boeing Starliner are now awaiting a decision on when they can return home from space.
Elon Musk may soon reveal news that could plunge Boeing's already troubled Starliner project into an even darker reality. Right now, two astronauts are stuck aboard the International Space Station, cut off from the much-needed rest and reunions with their families. NASA isn't letting them return aboard Boeing's Starliner because they've lost confidence in its safety. But what if Musk's upcoming revelation hints at something even more disastrous? Could it be that these astronauts might never come home? In August 2024, Elon Musk tweeted what seemed like a casual dig at Boeing, but it held deeper meaning. He hinted that just as car makers don't dominate the aviation industry, aircraft companies like Boeing wouldn't control space travel. This wasn't just a random comment. Musk's words followed a string of failures surrounding Boeing's Starliner. NASA had recently announced that astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore, who had flown to space aboard the Starliner in June, would return to Earth aboard a SpaceX spacecraft instead. Originally, they were meant to stay in space for just 8 days, but things took a dark turn when technical issues prevented the Starliner from docking properly with the International Space Station. NASA deemed it unsafe for the astronauts to use Boeing spacecraft for their journey back. Musk even suggested that without SpaceX, NASA might have had to call on Russia for help, a move that would have marked a huge step backward for American space travel. But how did we get here? To understand, we have to look back a decade. In 2014, NASA awarded contracts to Boeing and SpaceX, aiming to reduce America's reliance on Russia for transporting astronauts to the International Space Station. Boeing, one of the giants of aerospace, was handed a $4.2 billion contract to build the Starliner, while SpaceX, then seen as an underdog, received $2.6 billion to develop its Crew Dragon. Since 2020, SpaceX has successfully completed 7 crewed missions to the ISS. Boeing, on the other hand, has yet to deliver a single successful crewed flight. They've also gone $1.5 billion over budget, compounding their troubles. The Starliner was supposed to be Boeing's answer to America's space needs, a reusable crew capsule designed to carry up to 7 astronauts. But from the beginning, it's been plagued by problems. Software bugs, parachute malfunctions, and endless delays have left Boeing scrambling. One of the earliest red flags came in December 2019 when Boeing launched an uncrewed test flight of the Starliner. Although the spacecraft successfully reached orbit, a major glitch prevented it from docking with the ISS. The mission ended in disappointment, setting the tone for the Starliner's troubled journey. NASA's former administrator, Jim Bridenstine, stood before the cameras, his face a mix of frustration and forced optimism. The initial findings were in. A critical timing error had thrown Boeing's Starliner off course. The spacecraft's internal clock was off by mere seconds, but that small glitch had massive consequences. Starliner thought it was farther along in its mission than it actually was, causing a series of wrong maneuvers. It began performing actions it wasn't supposed to yet, wasting fuel and putting the entire mission at risk. This wasn't some minor issue. It was a potentially mission-breaking problem. The officials tried to put a positive spin on things, but it was obvious they were disappointed. Imagine spending years meticulously planning a mission only to have it derailed by something as small as a timing error. But that's the nature of space travel. Every tiny detail matters. This mission was supposed to be Boeing's big step forward, a chance to show the world they could compete with SpaceX. Instead, it turned into a glaring reminder of how unpredictable space exploration can be. But the Starliner's problems didn't end there. The failed test meant Boeing had to go back to the drawing board. They couldn't proceed without conducting another unmanned test flight. NASA was taking no chances, ordering an investigation that lasted 7 long months. By the end of it, they had found 80 things Boeing needed to fix before the Starliner could even think about another launch. As Boeing scrambled to resolve its issues, SpaceX continued to shine, completing crewed tests and moving forward at a pace Boeing couldn't match. And then, just as Boeing thought they were getting things under control, another disaster struck. Engineers found corroded valves in the spacecraft's propulsion system, more than a dozen of them. This wasn't a quick fix. Boeing had to once again push back the launch. It was a race against time and engineering setbacks. Finally, in May 2022, Starliner launched for its second unmanned spaceflight. This time, things seemed to go right. The spacecraft successfully docked with the International Space Station and returned to Earth safely. It was a long overdue victory for Boeing, and there was finally a sense of hope. By June, NASA announced plans for Starliner's first crewed flight, set for 2024. Veteran astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams were chosen for this high-stakes mission. These were no rookies. Wilmore had flown combat missions during the Gulf War and completed spacewalks during his time aboard the International Space Station. Williams, known for her resilience, had previously spent 6.5 months in space when her mission was unexpectedly extended. They were the perfect team to take on the troubled Starliner. But just as things seemed to be turning around, more technical issues arose during final testing. Boeing's long-awaited moment of redemption was once again delayed. And even with a new launch date in sight, there was a creeping sense of unease. Could Boeing really pull off what had been a rocky mission from the start? The Starliner program faced obstacles at every turn, and it seemed that each issue popped up at the worst possible moment. The stakes? Higher than ever. Boeing's reputation hung in the balance, and this launch wasn't just another test. It was a potential make-or-break moment. As the countdown began, tension filled the air. But just 3 minutes and 50 seconds before liftoff, one of the Starliner's 3 backup computers failed to sync with the others. The launch was canceled, again. It was a bitter blow, but Boeing wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet. After 2 failed attempts, June 5, 2024, finally marked a successful liftoff. The Starliner was launched into space atop an Atlas V rocket, with 2 veteran NASA astronauts on board. Their mission, to spend 8 days in orbit before returning to Earth on June 14th. But this story, as we've seen, was full of twists. The problems that had haunted the Starliner refused to stay behind. A helium leak, an issue from previous tests, reared its head again. Not just once, but 4 more leaks appeared after liftoff. Trouble followed Starliner like a stubborn shadow. As Starliner approached the International Space Station the next day, things took a tense turn. A last-minute thruster failure nearly derailed the spacecraft's docking attempt with the ISS. It was a close call. Too close. NASA began to worry. If the thrusters failed now, what else might go wrong? Would the crew's return to Earth be affected? Everyone was on edge. What they started as an 8-day mission quickly extended. 9 days after docking at the ISS, the return was postponed to June 22, 2024. Questions swirled in the media. Was the Starliner safe? What was stopping the astronauts from coming home? Boeing insisted the spacecraft was ready. They claimed every test had been completed, and they assured the public that the astronauts would make it back safely. But NASA wasn't so sure. After some deliberation, NASA made a bold move. They arranged for SpaceX to handle the crew's return. The catch? That mission wouldn't take place until February 2025, leaving the astronauts stuck aboard the ISS for nearly 2 more months. NASA's message was clear. Safety first, no compromises. Boeing's reputation took a massive hit, and for a company that had been a cornerstone of American space travel for decades, it was a brutal blow. But that wasn't the end of the Starliner's troubles. On August 31, 2024, astronaut Butch Wilmore reported an odd noise coming from the spacecraft. A strange pulsing sound, like a sonar ping, echoed through the cabin. NASA engineers scrambled to identify the source. Days later, they pinned it on feedback from the spacecraft's audio system. While the explanation was plausible, it didn't do much to soothe the mounting concerns. NASA finally made the call. Starliner would return to Earth, but without its crew. On September 6, 2024, the uncrewed Starliner separated from the ISS and began its journey back to Earth. Hurtling through space at 17,500 miles, the spacecraft re-entered Earth's atmosphere, deploying parachutes and airbags to cushion its landing. The capsule touched down in New Mexico's White Sands Space Harbor, with NASA calling it a bullseye landing. Yet it was a hollow victory. The spacecraft made it back, but without its astronauts. For Boeing, this wasn't the triumphant return they'd envisioned. The empty capsule may have landed safely, but it symbolized the struggles of a mission that had gone far off course. So what's next for Starliner? After all the setbacks, NASA Chief Bill Nelson still expressed confidence that Starliner would fly again, with astronauts on board. Steve Stick echoed that optimism, calling the recent landing a critical test flight for future missions. But it's not that simple. Boeing faces a daunting task, fixing the thruster issues that plague the spacecraft, a fix that could take years and cost millions. With SpaceX's Dragon crew proving its reliability, Boeing is in a race against time. The future of Starliner isn't guaranteed, and Boeing's place in space travel is on the line.